Hey guys, Rich from Richmond Gaming. Hope everyone is doing fantastically well. As you may have seen, Adepticon has happened and Atomic Mass Games did not disappoint, at least for the most part. So what we're going to do now is break down all of the new rules information that we've got, not including the reveals, we're going to do that on a separate video, but all the new rules information from the various videos and posts and spoilers that went up. And joining me to do this is, of course, Mr. Quinn Duggan and Mr. Ron Walker. How you guys doing?
Utini.
Thoughts overall on what they showed us from a pure rules perspective? Do you think it was enough, or?
I think they've covered pretty much everything that we wanted to know. Like, I imagine there will be a bit more nuance with some terrain rules that we'll get when we actually get hands-on with the book. But apart from that, I think I'm pretty satisfied.
Yeah, same. Yeah. I think no rules for me that annoyed me in any way. I think, as they've proven with MCP, whilst they're not necessarily doing things in the normal way, there's very little room, or it seems like it's going to be a bit like MCP, where there's very little room for any grey area, right? It's like a thing is a thing. There's, I think maybe even more so in this because, there's no size of terrain or anything like that. But yeah, we're going to go through, we're going to break down all or most of the rules that we've been able to remember between us, and we've all scoured the videos and taken down notes and things. So let's start then with a couple of, I suppose, things we'd already worked out, but clarification. So as we know in the core box, we get 2 strike forces. So we get the light side, which is pictured here, so we can see Rex and Anakin, and then we've got Ahsoka and Bo-Katan with the 501st and the, I always want to call them Night Owls, because to me they are, Quinn.
I mean, even AMG called them Night Owls in like the 360 video of them, so...
They did.
Even though they don't have the Night Owl tag, which is dumb.
This is true. But what we did get, even though we'd been able to piece it together ourselves a little bit, what we did get is confirmation on 2 different numbers. So first of all, the squad points. So as we know, Anakin brings 7 squad points with him. Ahsoka brings 8. And then Bo-Katan and the Clan Rise, or the Night Owls as they're called.
But yeah.
Kryze are going to cost 4 points cost each. But then obviously because Anakin has the 1 less, you've got Rex, who's also going to be 4, but then the 501st Troopers, who will be 3. And then lastly, the will of the Force that they bring in terms of the currencies. So Anakin brings 4, Ahsoka brings 3. And right now what they're saying, Quinn, is that, and Ron, sorry, is that every primary character will contribute. There may be the chance that some secondaries contribute at some point in the not too distant future, potentially. Next up, we've got the evil guys. So you've got Asajj, who is coming in at 8. You've got Maul, who is also at 8, and we'll circle back on that in a moment. With Maul, you've got Gar Saxon, who's 4. You've got the Super Mandalorian Commandos. Is that the official title for them?
Mandalorian Super Commandos.
They're
not Super Mandalorians.
Super Mandalorians. Who are going to be 4 points
together,
cost each.
Strong.
Got Kalani, who is an absolute beast, coming in at 5 points cost. And whilst we only see 1 unit or 1 character of B1s here, the full unit does contain 2 characters. They're coming in at 3 points cost. And then we've got Asajj bringing 3 force and Maul bringing 3 force. So for me, guys, there was no surprises on the light side, and I think mainly because we'd seen it, most of it. We'd worked out, the Asajj part of it, because we knew how much the droids cost and we knew how much she brought. Maul was a surprise for me. I thought there was going to be a mirror of, a 7 and an 8 in the core box. Ron, what was your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, it's a weird one. Like, you'd imagine some sort of a mirror between him and Anakin, but I think the fact that Maul only has 2 stamina rather than Anakin's 3, you kind of need to give Maul a slight bump with the units that he can take. And with Kraken also coming with Dooku, it means you could have 2 command droids, and if they are both 5 each, then you're definitely going to need them extra points to squeeze them in.
Yeah, yeah. Quinn, thoughts on that? I know you were of a similar opinion, I think, weren't you, that Maul was going to be a 7?
Yeah, to a degree. So we were under the impression that either the Super Commandos were going to be 3 or Gar Saxon was going to be 3, and the opposite one was going to be a 4. Having thought about it a little bit more now and having had a certain reveal, it makes more sense that Gar isn't a 3, because obviously you want to have Savage Press be easily to slot in alongside Maul. But also to the whole mirroring aspect of the core box, I actually think this does a better job of representing a gameplay mechanic and the design philosophy in a way, because primaries are all meant to be balanced against each other, and one of the mechanics for balancing primaries is their squad points and what they get to bring with them. So having 2 8 squad point primaries versus an 8 and a 7 should, on a game balance level, be the same in terms of how good the actual characters are and how the entire strike teams as a whole work.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Fair enough. Let's talk about the Force and what everyone's bringing there, because light side at a slight advantage with the fact that they're bringing, at least from the core box alone, they're bringing 7, whereas the dark side only bringing 6, contrary to what somebody said, where they were like, oh, you get 5 with Maul. But what's your thoughts on that? Do you think that could be a detriment to these guys, or do you think that some of the reduction that Kalani brings, for example, is going to make things just a little bit easier for them?
I don't know. It's a weird one because, you look at Maul's powers and you look at Ventress's powers in comparison to Anakin's and Ahsoka's. Anakin and Ahsoka's seem a little bit more expensive than those two. But
you've also got the fact that Maul can obviously take damage as well, can't he?
You can, yeah.
So not even having to use those.
Yeah.
Those, wills of the Force of the wills.
So with the dark side box, it's not so much like a straight line as it is with the light side. It's you pay 2, you get 2 of this. Whereas with the dark side, it adds more game mechanics like sacrificing health and a reduction in putting a card into reserve and stuff like that. So I think overall the economy of Force evens out.
There's also the fact that Asajj's identity, if you take down a primary, allows you to refresh Force.
To refresh, yeah. And let's get on to that then in terms of the Force and the things that we learned about it and everything else. So the first thing is, and we kind of knew this before, but your Force, the pool of tokens that you get, you put them at the side of your map, don't you? And then you flip them as you use them. And then every time you reset your deck, because obviously there's no rounds in this game, so every time one of you've gone through a full cycle of all your activations and you've got to refresh your deck, shuffle it and do it again, that's when you get to turn your tokens. So you can kind of plan out, can't you? You know at least, okay, I've only got Anakin left to go. I can blow everything now for Anakin to be able to just try and take down as many women and children too. They're always constant, which I was quite happy about. So what do we mean by that? Even if one of your primary characters is taken off the table, the next time you come to refresh and reset your Force, you get that amount. So if Anakin's been taken off the table, you still get the 4 to spend between everybody else. As we already knew, all active and reactive abilities have a Force cost. This can be 0 at the beginning of the game, but then for each injured token a unit has, the cost of all those abilities are going to be increased by 1. And you can also use the Force to reserve order cards, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Anything, guys, from the Force and I suppose just the general idea of it and how it's this sort of finite resource in the game. Do you think it adds to it? Do you think it detracts from it? Ron, what's your thoughts?
Oh, I think it definitely adds to it. It gives you a lot more strategic thinking on how you actually want to spend this force. And obviously taking characters with less force means that they should be able to make up for that in other areas. The one thing I dislike is the fact that you can't spend a force to re-roll a dice.
Oh, okay.
Because
yeah,
in the Phantom Menace, Qui-Gon Jinn rolls a dice with the force, and I just thought that would be pretty cool.
No, that's an ability on Qui-Gon when he comes out.
Yeah, maybe. And you know what? There's nothing to say, is there, that certain characters couldn't have that. But yeah, it does feel like, and we spoke about this before, didn't we? It does feel like rerolls are something they are, I think, staying away from for the most part.
Dice manipulation doesn't seem to be a big part of the game. No. And with like the whole force mechanic, I think that there's one thing which is getting like people having to get their heads around the fact that force isn't a thing that force users only use. It's like, it's not going, I push you. It can be that, but it's also just the force guiding things, because it's in all things, it's blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, it's the midichlorians, right? That's
yeah. Everyone's got midichlorians, right? But yeah, like, I also think, the whole thing, if you snipe a primary, you're still getting their force points. That's very big, because otherwise, Anakin two-tapping people and potentially getting them gone after like your third set of activations could be rough. I also think it's going to be a big component of list building in terms of, one, obviously, how much force you get to use each set of activations, but also planning out what you can do in that first set of activations, in those first turns for all those units, as to how like all that force balances out. Because obviously once you get beyond that initial engagement stage, that there are far more variables to like consider and stuff like that. But also characters are going to start getting like wounded and becoming injured and having to pay more and things like that. And you're going to get like a lot more decision points for that throughout the game, which I think is going to be really interesting to see. Yeah,
no, I agree. Let's move on then, guys, to... let me make sure we get the terminology right. Mission packs. There we go. So mission packs are essentially going to be... they're going to be made up of, I suppose, 10 different cards. First of all, you're going to have a map card. So we know in the core box, the only one that we get is shifting priorities. And it's the one with the 9 markers evenly spaced, one in the middle, and then, 8 around it, isn't it? All evenly spaced out on the board. But on top of that then, it's going to come with 9, they're calling them phase cards. Phase 1, 2, and 3. And then the way that you, first of all, determine whose set you're going to use is you roll for priority. Let's just talk about priority for a second, because obviously I imagine it's going to be a little bit like MCP, where it will dictate who put their characters down first. It'll dictate, who's going to get to make that first activation. Do you imagine it's going to be, roll 5 dice, strikes are the crits are the best, strikes are the next best, and so on and so forth, a bit like MCP, where it's just based on a number of results?
I don't like the fact that it's a roll-off either. I think it should go on whoever has the most force.
I was just about to say the same thing. I was like, maybe it could be whichever strike team has the most force points gets to be first. Because then that, once again, adds another list-building element into it.
I do quite like that, but that's not a rule, so we're not going to get into the conjecture.
Speculation, as we do.
But yeah, I think it'll be the same as MCP. Roll 5 dice, crits are the most, expertise a second, strikes a third.
Yeah.
Maybe you roll a number of dice equal to your force points.
Maybe. Who knows? But then basically that determines whose mission deck or mission pack you're going to be using. Now, for the foreseeable, everyone's mission pack is going to be the same, because we're only going to have access to one. But basically, you put your map card out, you put your tokens out, and then you shuffle the 3 phases, 1, 2, and 3 independently. You pick 3 cards at random, 1 from each pile, and that becomes your mission deck, doesn't it, for this particular game. So I don't know how many combinations there are, but there's quite a lot, even just from the core box. I'd probably say maybe about the same amount of different combination as what we got in MCP. When you look at the six cards there.
There's more different combinations, surely, because there's more cards, full stop.
Well, I was playing into the fact that they're all the same layout as well, so it's, you know, whereas in MCP you got different layouts and things, but
I think all those core box layouts pretty much fit into that 3x3 grid that you get in Shatterpoint, right?
They do, yeah, they do. And then basically, whoever wins the first round, or the first struggle, as they're being called, gets the struggle card, or gets the phase card. They're 1-up. And then when it gets to round 2 and round 3, whoever lost the previous struggle, so if you won phase 1, the person who lost phase 2 then gets to choose which side, or which of the 2 deployments you've got, or is going to there. So you can see the little markers there as well. There's 2 options for the map. You've got the 3 symbols from the defense die. And what happens with this is, at the beginning of each player's turns, they roll a die, and one of these symbols, depending on what you roll on the defense die, becomes the priority. And rather than scoring 1 VP for those ones, they score 2 VPs, don't they? So it's not only a question of, am I at the front of the board or the back of the board, so depending on where you want them to be more, but there's every chance that you could have 2 points by you, but all of a sudden you roll and your opponent gets the priority by them, forcing you to try and go and take it. But then equally, they then make a roll and it moves back to you. And I mean, it's called shifting priorities, I gather, for a reason, because everything's going to be moving all over the place. And I think for me, it's going to make the game very, very reactive. Quinn, thoughts on the maps, the phases, sort of how things are going to be moving around during a game?
Yeah, I really like it. You know, it feels like, so as a bit of tangent that makes sense and comes back into what we're discussing quite quickly is, I used to play Guild Ball, and Ron used to play Guild Ball as well. Guild Ball was a great game, but it suffers from one major flaw, which was you were playing the exact same scenario every game. A goal was always worth 4 points, a takeout was always worth 2, a mascot was worth 1. There are a couple of things that messed with that, but those were always your ways of scoring VPs. And the game suffered for that. Dead now. Thanks, Dave Cameron. But then, you know, came to MCP. MCP fixed that problem by having crises. You've got 2 crises that you're playing every game. That one's coming from one player's deck, one's coming from the other player's deck. You've got that going for you. And now, in Shatterpoint, you've got, like, effectively missions that change mid-game.
Yeah.
Which is really, really interesting. And I think he's just, like, going further and further down that evolutionary path from Guild Ball to MCP to this.
For me, I just like the fact that there's no turn 0 here, right? Like, you don't know what you're playing. I mean, okay, you know that if you win, you know the one of 3 phase 1 cards that you're going to be playing, but you don't know what it is. And the fact that your plan can be completely messed up with the roll of a die in phase 2, and all of a sudden your opponent's got 2 and 1 victory points on their back line, and you've got 1, and
it's
you have
like
to
you
move
have
forward.
To, like, shift your priorities or something, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? Yeah. Ron, how do you feel about this versus, I suppose, other games that we've played?
I think because it has like the random aspect of, oh, this VP is now worth 2, and then this VP is now worth 2, is something a lot of people are not going to be able to get on with, because obviously they can't have a set in stone plan for how they want the game to go. But I think that's a really good thing, because obviously it means that you're going to have to adapt in order to be able to win that struggle. And yeah, I don't know. I think it stops people saying, okay, I lost the first struggle, so I will take this map and I will sit here and just win the next two struggles on principle. Whereas it can be, oh well, now that objective over there is worth 2 VPs. What do I do?
Yeah, I like the fact it's moving all the time, and as we know, you always score VPs at the end of your turn, with the exception of the first turn of the game. And just to clarify, guys, that is not each player's first turn, it's player one's first turn, and then from there on in, you score points, even if it's the first turn of a new struggle, I believe. I think that's how it works.
A turn being a unit's activation, right?
A unit's activation, yeah. And we'll get on to a little bit around VP scoring and momentum and how that works as well.
Things like that.
Yeah. Let's talk quickly then about deployment, because we all laughed, didn't we, at that overview of the picture, where it was like, you know, everyone was kind of, I'll show this one again in a second.
Like
everyone was like,
shape.
why are they all in this little weird formation? Well, the reason is, as we now know, we'll just go back to this one a second. The way that deployment is going to work is you, first of all, deploy your primary unit, and those primary units have to be deployed within range 2. Makes sense, range 2 for me, guys, because what you don't want is them being so far up the board when they've got so much movement. But then from there, as we can see on the diagram, the secondary and the support units from that particular squad all then have to deploy within range 1 of the primary unit, which is why when we go back to that overview shot, everyone's all stood in these little weird diamond formations. It does, however, mean that you can be within range 2 during deployment to be able to contest certain objectives. What will be interesting is, and I'd love to get you guys' thoughts on this, do you think you deploy before or after you flipped over the phase 1 card and you know which combination of those 9 points are going to be active?
After.
I agree. I think
definitely
it's going to be
after.
after. Because if not, you can pretty much guarantee to be within range 2 of 2 of them, right? If it just so happens like that. Ron, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it'll be after as well.
I do also wonder, with regard to claiming objectives, do you only claim objectives that can be claimed by the characters activating, or is it just you check every objective like at the end of every single turn in terms of like control?
Or you check every it's a and we'll get onto scoring in a little bit. But yeah, in fact, let's jump into the how you contest. Let's go into that part first. So you have to be within range 2 to be contesting. But yeah, what you do is at the end of every turn, with the exception of turn 1, you check. In fact, no, let me rephrase that. So at the end of every turn, including turn 1, you check to see which tokens and which objectives are being contested. Doesn't have to be with an active character, and we saw a couple of examples of that in the video. So if we look at the picture that's up at the moment, basically, even though nobody's moved on there, there'd still be 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 objectives that were being contested. What then happens is after turn 1 is when you start scoring the points. But what you can also do is, if you've contested that objective during the first scoring phase, you can leave that objective and you still score that phase. It's like a pay to flip in MCP,
right?
Yeah. So you gain control of it, but it means then that your opponent only needs 1 character to come and contest that point and flip it. In terms of going to try and flip a point that somebody else is contesting, you need more characters than your opponent to flip. So what that means is if they've already got the point and then you walk up with one character, and they've got one character on there, you're not going to flip that point, and they will score the point. There isn't a draw. You need 2 characters to be within range 2 to be able to flip that point and take it away from them. So it works a little bit different to how we've seen some other games.
So another point, at the end of your activation, it's only you that scores points, right?
It's only you that score points. Yeah, you only ever score points at the end of your activation. Yeah, because that's the whole, and we'll get into the struggle meter and the the momentum and the tug of war element to it. But yeah, you only ever score points at the end of your activation. That's the thing that scores your VPs. Okay, guys, so let's talk quickly then about scoring the VPs, what it means, how it works, because we did learn a little bit more. Again, we'd got little bits of snippets, haven't we? But we kind of had this confirmed now. So, as we mentioned, there are these individual struggles, and then we've got the struggle. Is it the struggle counter, this? Or is this the momentum counter? I can't. This is the struggle tracker,
momentum
right?
is black.
Yeah,
the
and struggle is
clear.
Goes up and down. Yeah, so basically at the beginning of every phase, so the very beginning of the game, plus as you go into phase 2, and then if you go into phase 3, this gets reset. So you've got 0 in the middle, which is where the struggle cube goes, and every time you score a VP, it gets moved X number of VPs towards your black token, which is the momentum. Now, let's say I activate, or I activate second, because obviously you don't score any first round, but I activate, I'm playing against Quinn, and I score 2 VPs, so I move up to 2, from 0 up to 2. Quinn then goes, and he scores 4 VPs, taking him up to 2 on. Sorry, it's actually taking 2. Yeah, 2 on his side. So you go from 2 to 1 to 0 to 1, and then back up to 2.
It would pull me to 1 on my side, right? Because you've got the middle 0 point.
No, if you score 4.
No, because you go 2 over to yours. You're on 2. I can't count. Ignore me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, there's this other thing that affects how many points are needed, isn't there, to be able to win a particular struggle or a phase of the game. And that's where that black token at the end comes in. And this is the momentum. And there's quite a lot more things than I thought there would be that's going to cause momentum. So I just want to make sure I've got them all right here. So basically, as you mentioned, score VPs at the end of each of your turns. We knew that. Move the cube 1 spot per VP. That's the clear cube. And the momentum, you gain the momentum each time you wound an enemy character. Anytime the clear cube moves and ends on 0, both players get a momentum. So in that same example there, if I scored 2, no momentum scored there. But then if Quinn scores 2 and it goes back to the dead centre, we move up the track, both of us, from 8 to 7, basically. And lastly is, if you score VPs, but you don't manage to pull the struggle tracker back over to your side, then you gain the momentum for that as well. So it's like this constant ticking thing that just, like a clock even.
Ooh.
That just keeps getting...
So,
good, sorry, Ron.
End of your turn, you score VPs, yeah? It stays on your side. Does your opponent then gain momentum?
No.
So momentum is only gained if you don't pull it back to your side during your own turn, and only when it hits 0.
Or if it's stuck in the middle, yeah. Okay.
Or when it's stuck in the middle, yeah.
And
or,
you get it for wounding characters as well.
Yeah. And as we know, there are going to be certain abilities in the game that allow you to gain momentum from doing other things as well, right?
Or even like VPs, potentially. You know, this is where the fun begins. Gains you an additional VP for like taking out a primary or a secondary.
Yeah, exactly. So there could be other things in the game that affect it, but then once a struggle is done, everything is reset back to 0, basically. So struggle goes in the middle, the momentum, any momentum you've gained is taken off. Now, one thing we don't know the answer to is, does momentum start on 8 or
No,
is there nothing there at first?
I believe there's nothing there at first. It's
Okay.
not confirmed, but it would make sense.
And I believe you win the struggle when the two meet, right? You need to be able... So
when you get the struggle cube on top of the momentum
on top
cube,
of it, yeah.
or to
So
the
when
end
they,
of your thing, yeah.
Yeah, when they meet. So, yeah, again, you know, we knew quite a bit of this, but it's good to get that extra little bit of information. I mean, Quinn, we spoke and said these games are going to be quick, like with all these things that keep moving up and moving up and moving up. I can see these being 45 minutes to an hour and 15-minute long games.
What is it they say on the what is the stupid time frame they give?
45
on the
minutes
boxes?
for MCP.
Yeah, no, that might be true for Shatterpoint. It's definitely not true for MCP.
Yeah. Ron, what's your thoughts on the scoring, how it works, the fact that it is this tug of war thing? Because again, it's very, very different, at least to any other game that I've been exposed to.
Oh yeah, it's 100% unique. I've not come across anything even similar to this. And I think the fact that you score victory points at the end of each of your character activations rather than the round as a whole means that you can be a lot more risky in the type of play that you make. So you could move up, take control of one, then just leave it and go and fight. Whereas like in our current game MCP, you find a lot of players just, I'll get this point and I'll just sit there for the rest of the game, and it just seems boring.
Like you could end up in some interesting situations where like Anakin's on a point and like it's tied between like you and your opponent, but Anakin goes, hits someone, hits them again, wounds them so they don't count, and then off the back of his attack gets like a reposition for a move, spends his second action to do a move, and then does like a jump and gets all the way across the board to another one to then give you more weight of numbers on another point, and suddenly that's like a 2-point swing.
So let's quickly talk about the wounds, when you can't contest, because there was a lot of like, and I'm going to blame AMG for this one, guys, a little bit. The inconsistency in terminology when it's come, particularly around stamina, durability, wounds, damage, injured, for me hasn't been great. Ron, I know you're of a similar opinion. Quinn, I think you're in the same camp as well.
It's backward.
Yeah.
It's backwards. Injured and wounded should be backward, like should be inverted in terms of like language. Then it makes sense.
Even if it's not, just be consistent. So, what do we know, and what have you managed to gain from everything that we're doing? So, first of all, a character has two things that are essentially linked to the health of that character. They first of all got stamina. So that is, as we can see on Anakin's card, for Anakin, that is 11. And durability, which basically shows how many wounds a particular character can take before they are removed from the board. So the way it works is you take damage. The moment you've taken damage equal to your stamina, you become wounded. Now, for anyone who's played MCP, see wounded as being this state of you're still on the board. In MCP, you would flip. It's slightly different in this game, but you're still on the board, but you can't do anything, right? You can no longer contest. You can no longer create range pools or melee pools or melee auras, and we'll get into that in a minute as well. You can't spend any force to do any reactive abilities or anything like that.
Right?
Can't be attacked, yeah, because I mean you might be able to, but there's no over damage.
Like,
but there's
for all intents and purposes, you are inert in terms of the rest of the game.
Yeah, exactly that. Then what happens the next time that character activates, they take that wound token and they flip it to an injured token. So that character is now... remove all the damage. I believe remove all special conditions, but we haven't had that yet confirmed. So we need to clarify that one. But once they come back, the only thing that happens is every reactive and every active ability costs 1 more, even if it costs 0. You can still contest normally. It's not like MCP where a character that's injured doesn't count for contesting if there's a healthy character there. There's none of that in this game, or at least there's none of that in this game that they've gone into. However, what is slightly different, and maybe the only thing, guys, that I was a little bit disappointed in, is support units. So we've got the 501st Clone Troopers here. So the first thing about the support units is there's no unit cohesion needed. So that means you can have them both independently across the board, but they share actions. So if you need to move one of them, you can move the other one, but if you choose not to move it, that action is done for that character. Again, if you choose to attack, they can both attack, but if one of them attacks, the other one doesn't get to do something different. They have a shared stamina pool, and they have a shared durability pool. So you can have one 501st Clone Trooper in the corner of the map contesting a point, nowhere near anything, and if the other guy gets, takes 7 damage, he's also wounded. Same goes for any conditions or anything like that you gain that are negative, but also any conditions you gain that are positive as well. And we'll go into some of those in a little minute. But if you lose a wound, you don't remove one of those units, one of those characters from the board. They both stay on there until you've gone through. The last thing we want to talk about is when a unit is taken off the board. So a unit is taken off the board if at the end of their activation, they have wound and injured tokens equaling to their durability. So for the 501st, they would, let's say they were taken down, they've got an injured token and a wound token. At the beginning of their turn, they flip it, so they end up then with 2 injured tokens. At the end of that turn, they would be taken off the board. So you get that last hurrah run, don't you, where you get to... There's no clap back where somebody comes up and just double taps you and you're just taken off and you didn't get to do anything with them, which I like. I really do like that. It feels like it's going to make the game more balanced. Quinn, anything that you think I've missed when it comes to wounds, damage, stamina, durability, injured? Anything that we've missed?
Words there. I don't like the fact there's that many words. I don't think so. Obviously, you've got the whole increase in force for every injured token you have. That's going to be really interesting to see how that pans out. Obviously, like you mentioned, you've got the basically no alpha strike ability. You can't just remove a model from the table before it activates. There's even an inbuilt thing of, when you take the amount you would need to die, you still get that one last activation before you're removed.
Yeah. And that's the wound and injured thing, isn't it? Because just to clarify, it's when you have injured tokens equal to your durability.
Ron, activation with equal to or more, even though I don't think you can have more.
You can't get more. Ron, anything from your side that you think we've maybe missed, or just any general comments about it?
No, I think once you've got the terminology down and you figured out that it is indeed backwards, then you're fine. But it is very much backwards, in my opinion.
Yeah, it does feel a little bit backwards, doesn't it?
I don't know why they just didn't stick to the MCP terminology of dazed and injured. Yeah,
while you're dazed, you can't do anything.
Yep.
But then you gain the injured token once you are, once you're there. Let's talk about dice, because we did get confirmation. I think it was Ellis that put these up, so thank you to Ellis. But as we always knew, the 8-sided attack dice, 4 different symbols. So we've got the crit. We're going to have 1 crit. So as we kind of guessed, guys, on a previous video, because they can't be blocked, we thought that there was only going to be one of them, didn't we? You get 3 strikes, 2 expertise, and 2 failures. And then on the defense dice, as we already knew, just 2 of each. Any comments on the dice, guys? I think it's kind of what we expected, really, isn't it?
Yeah, you can't really fuck up dice.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Some.
I would have preferred like a different color scheme for the dice.
Oh my god.
Let me talk to you about how in the old MESBG dice, the symbol that denoted the type of dice was a 1. Like,
I am well aware. I hated playing against people who use those dice when I played MESBG because that is the dumbest dice system in existence.
It really
GW
is.
have thankfully learned their lesson, though it took them about 20 years.
They're also terrible quality as well, but we'll not get into that. Okay, guys, let's move on to the special conditions in the game, or at least the ones that we've seen. As we know, there may be others in the rulebook, but these are the 4 that have been talked about. First of all, strain, so the little bleed symbol. This is going to be take 3 damage the next time you make a move or attack action. So you're going to be able to get rid of this if you want. But it kind of shows how important that recover is, isn't it? But I gather, depending on who you are, if you're a lightsaber wielding Jedi who's on his heal myself side, you may not want to, waste an action getting rid of this because you know you're going to heal yourself up as you do your attacks. But this one I thought was interesting. Ron, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's pretty good. Can't really say much more about it than I like it.
Yeah.
The word on it, from what we know, is that does it happen after you take the action?
Yes. Yeah. So when you take,
so it'll be a bit like the interaction between healing factor and bleeds in MCP, where you can heal up damage that you've already got, but then you're going to go back down after the strain, right?
No. No, I think when you actually make the action, you take the damage.
So when you declare the action,
I think that's when you.
Unless it's a recover.
Yeah. Unless it's a recover, obviously. Well, move or attack action. That's the key thing.
So you could hunker, shoot.
It's not going to affect hunker. It's not
going
to
you
affect.
Can't shoot. That's an attack action.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is you could hunker, not take the damage, then shoot.
It's not hunker,
damage.
Is it? It's
cover.
Cover. Take cover.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not all actions that will trigger this. So yeah, next one then is exposed. So this is the crit symbol, and this is going to be the next defense dice that you roll. Crit symbol is MCP, isn't it? This is the exclamation mark.
That's what they're known as in English. Yeah, right.
I know. Yeah, exclamation mark exposed. You're not going to get. You're not going to be able to roll any expertise on your next defense roll. So any expertise you roll are essentially failures because you're not going to be able to convert them on the defense chart. This might be something you want to get rid of because this could really hurt, especially some of those Mandalorians where it feels like a lot of their defense comes from their expertise and their Beskar armor. Quinn, thoughts on this one?
Yeah, it's pretty good. Fairly certain Anakin doesn't have access to it, right? Yeah, no. Good. Because if Anakin had access to it and double tapped someone and went, cool, my first swing, you can't have expertise now. Hit you again, die.
I'm sure this is probably they didn't want somebody to be able to do that.
The design.
I think he can dish out strain though. I think so.
He dishes out strain, yeah.
Yeah, so the follow up attack potentially.
He does. He does all 3 of the other ones.
All 3 of the other ones, yeah. Pin. This is the little broken arrow. Basically, you can't make a move action, which feels bad.
Real good. Like this feels like the closest stagger equivalent from MCP, right?
It does. Now, what we will say here is what we don't yet know is what is defined as movement in this game, because in MCP, anytime you pick up your character and put them in a different place, it's movement. So I think just to, confirm with this one, we don't 100% know if you could do things like a dash or do things like a reposition or things like that my view is that this would be, you can't use one of your actions to move your character until you remove it. I feel like that's what it would be. So, whether it's a dash or whether it's a normal advance or a climb or something like that. Ron, thoughts on that and what it could or couldn't include?
Well, if there's some characters that do enable like a double move, then you could remove the pin, then still move. But why would you not just recover, remove it, and move? It's a weird one because it says the next move action you take.
It's also like what's defined as an action, right?
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was alluding to.
It's like a terminology problem again. Like,
Yeah.
that? So if you had the pin, but you're already engaged in combat, what happens if you have the reposition trigger on your combat tree? Does that stop that?
I think you're going to be able to do that.
Yeah, because like also, is it the scroll in MCP? Once again, I'm going back to MCP, but the old scroll that made your speed short, you could still get like medium advances off of Steel Rush and stuff with Zemo, right? Mm-hmm. Like it could be a thing where it interacts with one aspect of moving, but not others. So like, does it stop Maul and Ahsoka using force speed, or like what's going on there, right?
Yeah, yeah, it'll be interesting. Lastly, then, or at least of the four that we've seen so far, disarm, the little broken weapon symbol, and as far as we know, guys, this whilst it's a ranged weapon, it's going to be melee and ranged, is what it feels like. Basically, no expertise in the next attack roll. So kind of the offensive version of exposed. Still not something that you want, and a real good way to turn off damage with some of these big characters and forcing them to...
It really screws over your force users like Anakin and Ventress, right? Because they've got single expertise, double crit. Like...
Yeah, makes it very, very hard. Guys, any conditions that you think are maybe already hidden in here somewhere? But I think when we looked at the MCP box, didn't we? It was like there's 3 conditions in the core box, but yet it listed like 6 or 7 in the original thing. So, Ron, I'll start with you. Any ones that you think could be included at a later date, or maybe even are already in there that we haven't seen yet?
I hope there is one that can make you stop using force powers.
Oh,
like a force block or something.
Like something just Yoda places on you.
Yeah, like on your next force thing, or increase your next force by an additional one.
Increase the cost of your next force power by 1 or something like that. That feels like it's a little more manageable than just like nope, nothing. Basically, you just roll out the child from the X-Men movie that just turns off everyone's abilities. Quinn, anything for you that you'd like to see that isn't on there at the moment?
Limited power. I want some sort of like shock condition, because obviously Dooku's coming. He does force lightning.
He does.
If you get like hit by a force lightning attack, I want there to be like a thing where like maybe in your next attack roll, you like crits become fails for you or something like insane like that. Where like you're shocked you've got that like coursing through your body. You're obviously not in complete control of your like own motor skills. Like maybe not like they become failures, or like maybe they just become like normal hits instead. Like because we've seen like the whole defensive expertise turn a crit into a hit before, but having something like that that's like a condition you put on someone could also be really cool, I think.
Yeah, I just feel like they're probably on the fence of like they won't do anything else now with defense or attack rolls because they've got disarm and exposed. But I agree, it would be very, very cool. Let's go through and have a look at some of the other symbols, because now we know a little bit more about them and we know what they're going to do. Quinn, the little compass symbol that, we spoke about for a long time.
We like pretty much settled on it. It was going to be some kind of movement, right?
It was, yeah. But this is a hell of a lot better than what we first thought it was going to be. So this is Reposition. It is make a full move. or a full advance using that long tool. Now, this breaks the rule of only being able to use the short tool if you're within range 2 of somebody. And we'll talk about these control zones in a little bit, but I think this is going to be very, very powerful. Because I just think being able to be in the thick of things and then reposition yourself to move out of the way. Now, it's important to note that this is not a climb. It doesn't let you do a climb. So you're not going to be able to advance up terrain. But what it could trigger is something that we'll go on to in a little bit later, which is you may be able to go up a ladder or a rope or something like that, which is quite cool. But yeah, I think this is going to be very, very powerful. Ron, thoughts on the reposition ability?
Yeah, I think anything that gives you an additional move action when you're limited to one action per activation. The fact that you can move into combat, hit someone, get a reposition off your combat tree, and be able to move again is a very powerful thing. I think. Yeah,
I think especially for the VP control game. I mean,
yeah,
it could actually be a point where you can get. This may enable you to be able to get to a point that you otherwise couldn't get to because you could only use one move action.
Yeah.
Rather than using a force power or something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
Next up, and this is another symbol that we've seen in both abilities but also on the combat tree as well, is we're calling it the heal symbol. That name is to be confirmed because it contradicts one of the other abilities, but basically remove 1 damage token from this unit. So yeah, it's kind of what I thought it was, where it's quite basic, but I think it's going to be very, very important, especially for characters like Maul, for example, where you want to take some damage to get those extra dice, and then you can then do your attack to then heal yourself back up some at the same time.
Assuming Maul has that on his other stance, yeah.
I think he does. Yeah, I think he does. I think
have we seen his other stance?
I think so. Yeah. But Quinn, thoughts on heal and what it does? It's obviously not quite as much as what you thought.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be basically full recovery action for each symbol. That isn't the case. It's okay. Yeah, that's basically it. It's like cool. I mean, my philosophy whenever playing games is always, why would I heal myself when I could just kill you and you can't hit me again?
But you can do both, so why not both in these ones? Next up, we've got shove, and this is we found out the most useless tool ever created in a game ever. So basically, shove is push your enemy away range 1. Now it is a push, so they have to go the full distance, and it is away. And I did see, I don't know if it was a little faux pas, I did see, I think it was Will Schick in one of the games, take the movement tool and put it at 90 degrees and check what away was. So for anyone that doesn't know, in MCP, you basically have a 90-degree angle, don't you? You line it up so that the 90 degrees creates a line that goes through the center of both bases, and then when you push the character away, that's the limit. I don't know if it was just muscle memory from playing MCP, but that is what he did. So I'm not saying that's exactly the same, but it feels like that's what it would be, guys, right? In terms of how away would work. Ron, are you of a similar opinion?
Yeah, I think so as well. Like the 90 degree tool with the movement angle just makes the most sense, and it's the easiest to do rather than, oh well, my base is not exactly lined center of yours, so away is slightly more this way. It's just 90 degree. You can't mess with that. Then it's where it is.
I think it makes it more impactful as well, doesn't it? Because it gives you a slightly wider angle to be doing it. But then what's very interesting is, and this leans into when they were talking about Maul, because he's got a couple of other things that he does with this as well. But you get to follow up range 1 towards the character afterwards. So not only can you shove them, you then get to move yourself up. So that could be pushing them off a point and potentially getting you on the point as well, which is very, very interesting. Quinn, thoughts on shove and how it will sort of play into the VP scoring element?
I think it's going to be incredibly important. Obviously, there are some keywords that we saw on cards over the weekend that we don't know the actual specifics of. But if one of them is that you can't be shoved, that's going to be incredibly important. You know, we all play MCP.
Steadfast wasn't Steadfast.
Yeah,
I think is the one that we were thinking.
I mean, we all play MCP. We know how important repositioning opponents is. And I think especially because of the scoring system of Shatterpoint and how you're doing it every single activation, and you've got that tug of war going on. Just every if every activation you can just eke out an extra bit of control each time, you're very slowly but surely going to move that towards your end of the track.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's the thing: have they said anything about falling? Obviously, you've pushed someone off a gantry.
Well, so the only thing we know so far is that you have to climb up terrain. You do not have to climb down terrain.
Yeah.
So there's nothing. I'm gonna take a stab and say there's no fall damage.
Superhero landing. Woo.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. What you push B1s off a gantry, you're telling me they're landing superhero?
Yeah.
Nah.
All three of them in formation do like the Black Widow pose.
Yeah, I don't think so. Right, lastly then is Hunker. So this is the little symbol, the one that we thought about. I think we first saw it on Rex's card.
Yeah.
It's actually a bit better than what I thought. So Hunker is gain 1 extra defense dice versus ranged. However, they can stack. So we saw examples of this during the game. And they're not spent like they are in other games. They stay there until the beginning of your next activation and you lose them all, or until you are engaged in melee combat. Being engaged in melee combat, as we'll get into, basically means there is somebody else, there is an enemy within range 2 of you. At that point, you are engaged. Hunker, Quinn, it's a little bit better than what I thought it was going to be. The extra dice, all of a sudden you've got clones rolling, 6 dice, is it? Or 7 dice potentially, depending on what's done to them.
Yeah, it does give me an idea as to what another one of those keywords does, though.
Okay.
So we saw the sharpshooter keyword on the Clan Kryze Mandalorians and Gar Saxon, right?
You think it ignores Hunker tokens?
I think it may because it was sharpshooter and sharpshooter 2.
Yes,
so
there was the numbers next to
for every value in sharpshooter you have, it may be that your opponent adds 1 less dice for a Hunker token up to the number of the sharpshooter value.
My only problem with that is there's no value to that unless they have a Hunker token.
Maybe it counts for Hunker and cover.
Let's talk very quickly then, guys, about cover, because it kind of does, it does the exact same thing as Hunker, which is basically gives you 1 extra defense die. It does stack with cover as well, which is obviously quite nice. From what we've been able to garner from it, you're going to need to be on the same elevation level as the actual terrain itself, and the size of the terrain doesn't matter. However, it's whether or not you can draw a line through it and also see as well. So the boxes you can see here, you'd be stood behind, you'd get cover, and your opponent would have line of sight. However, if it's something bigger than your elevation level and it's solid, they ain't going to be able to see you. But they did talk about, Quinn, didn't they, and Ron, the gantries, and that they purposely put the little holes in them so you could shoot up and down between levels, which I quite liked. I thought that was really, really good. But yeah, it feels like it's going to be, once you know the rules, they're very easy. Line of sight and cover feels like it's going to be very, very easy to calculate and work out in this game. Anything you guys saw from any of the videos that adds to that, or maybe you weren't very happy with, or are just generally happy with?
I'm pretty cool with everything, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, like, the possibility that being on a higher elevation than the target you're attacking, in terms of, like, shooting, it, like, removes their cover bonus, I think is really cool. Like, because it makes sense, right? You know, high ground.
Potentially, yeah. I don't know if that's been confirmed. That
It's not
one.
been, I said the potential of it.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, I think it makes sense. Like somebody being higher up, like there's a reason why you have, towers and turrets and things that are high up to be able
you've
to.
got a better angle of seeing over that cover and having more of them exposed, right?
Yeah, exactly that. And then 3 last symbols. Just want to go through. First of all, these are all. I think these are all on the actual tokens as well, or the measurement tools as well. But you've got advance. So that's going to be what you use when you're making a move action. And this isn't going to allow you to be able to move up and down terrain. However, what was very interesting, guys, I don't know if you saw this, same rules apply. So the actual measurement tool itself could be touching a building, and even though if you ran down the center of it, your base would go over the building, that doesn't count. So it's only the width of the tool that matters. And they did say that a little bit like MCP, you can, once you've placed it, you can move along, and as long as your character's base is touching the movement tool, it's the full thing that's available. Is that what you guys read it as well?
Yeah, I read it as the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
Then got jump. That's going to be using the short tool. That's going to allow you to move elevation levels. And then lastly is dash, which basically you use the short tool, but you can't climb with it. So that's the only thing there.
And that's the tool you use when you're getting out of combat as well, yeah?
When you want to get out of combat. Actually, that's a good point, actually, Quinn. That's the only one you can use when you want to get out of combat. Okay, so let's talk about they talked about these elevation bands, didn't they? And how they work. So basically, a character's elevation band is going to be range 2 in height from the bottom of their base, wherever they are. And then if we take a look at this next picture here, we can see the range 2 token. And they did sort of say, didn't they, cleverly, that they had made sure that all their terrain that was where you had to climb up was above range 2. So if it's above range 2, you need to use a climb action or a jump or something that can get you up there. However, and as you can see, the boxes, you can move over them freely. One thing I did notice as well, when I think it was Schick repositioned Anakin, he was stood atop those boxes, even though his base overlapped. I don't know if that was a faux pas. I don't know if that was, just a thing that they did. But yeah, Ron, what's your thoughts on, do you think you're going to be able to stand on the top terrain, even if your base doesn't fit?
I hope not.
Yeah.
Just because it makes certain pieces of terrain viable when it shouldn't be, like antennas and stuff like that. Like, oh well, I've somehow managed to balance on this antenna. It's just.
To be fair, if you
know.
can balance the model on top of like a tiny antenna, I think you deserve to just have the cover.
Well, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, I really like on the demonstration video. There was like overhanging on the gantries and stuff, and I really didn't like that. I think,
it can lead to precarious like model positioning and like
then especially because they had an objective on the gantry as well. It means that you could get more models onto that objective than is viably possible. I think like having overhang is not a good thing.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of it, and it also means that so the crates, for example, on the shot we've got at the moment, technically, if you were stood on there, your let me make sure I get the wording right. Your elevation band is now, because you've gone up that extra. 3/4 of an inch, your elevation band is now within range of something, so you don't then have to climb up. So not a fan of that one, to be brutally honest. However, there is one of the ways in there that you can get up and down terrain, And again, let me make sure I get
Ingress
the
points.
Yeah, Ingress point. And these I really like. So the Ingress point is, first of all, something that you're going to agree before a game starts. And they're going to be ropes, ladders, elevators, whatever
just
it
one
is.
sec, Rich. 1 sec. When you're moving, you can move up any piece of terrain that is size 2 or less, yeah? That is not an that's an elevation band.
No. So you can move up any piece of terrain that is size 2 or less than the bottom of your base up where you are at the moment, because your elevation band moves with you.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is,
if there was a thing where, let's say,
stairs, for example, or like a crate next to a building,
if there was
freely move onto the crate that's under 2, does that, and then increase your band, so you could
there's
then
a crate that's maybe an inch and a half of the road, so half of a range 2, you move up onto that as part of your move, you are now slightly higher up. Does that mean you can then walk, get up onto the gantry? Parkour!
Yeah, that's basically what I'm thinking.
I think it does.
I genuinely like
I think that's
parkour, mate.
Bullshit.
Yeah,
I think that's bullshit.
Parkour.
Bullshit.
Ingress points, though, the way they work, if you finish your move, and again, this is what we don't know yet, is what move. It looks like it was anything, because they used a reposition and did this. But if you finish your move and you are within range 1 of an ingress point, so let's say that you're at the bottom of these ladders, you can then move to the top of the ladders and place yourself within range 1 of the top of them. And that's all part of your same movement. And that, you don't need to have any extra movement available or anything like that. If it just gets you within 1 of the bottom, you can still move to the top. So a little bit like how climb used to work in Legion. But where you do it but what would be very interesting is, and this is where what becomes a movement, is there a way where, because I don't know if you remember this from Legion, Ron, with Grievous, and he'd get within range 1 of a piece of terrain, and then move up and move himself to within 1, and then he'd be within 1 of the other side of the terrain, so he could move back down and then be within 1 of the other side. It was utter bullshit.
Great.
I hope that's not the case. That's all I'll say on that one. But yeah, let's quickly move on to these zones that we were talking about. So we've got a picture here. Basically, you've got Anakin and a 501st Trooper who are within 2 of each other. That's absolutely fine. That's not a problem. But you've got Anakin, who is now classed or deemed as being engaged with the B1 battle droids because they're within range 2 of each other. So what that means is, well, neither character can make a ranged attack, which most definitely affects the B1s a lot more than it affects Anakin. However, if you look at the other unit of B1s that are, probably range 4 or 5 away, let's say they're in range for attack though, if you did an attack action, they're both going to be able to do that. The first set of B1s has to use their melee attack, because that's all they can do, but the second set of B droids will be able to fire in to that combat. And then, as we spoke about as well, you have this range 2 bubble around you, don't you, where anyone that comes into it that's an enemy, you're now engaged in melee, and it penalises you for being able to move out of it as well. So I'm sure we'll need some more clarification around how that works, because there's going to be some nuances and things like that. But it seems pretty straightforward in terms of what can and can't be done. I'm glad, Ron, Quinn, I don't know if you feel the same, but I'm glad they just allowed shooting into combat. It's the one thing I don't like about MESBG is that when you can do it as well, it's quite convoluted, and you can only do it if you're an evil faction. But yeah, thoughts on that engagement bubble and how it potentially works and things, Quinn or Ron first, whichever.
I'm glad that they've made an attack a overall action rather than breaking it into ranged and melee. So with the Anakin and B1 example, it means that your first action with that support unit, because they essentially share everything, is that you can still get 2 attacks from the one action. So you can have the melee attack with Anakin, and then the other into Anakin, and then the other B1s can shoot something else or shoot into that combat. I think that's good.
Yeah, no, I do like that. Quinn, thoughts?
Yeah, I like it. I also think it's going to be interesting to see how often each type of unit does each action. Like overall, obviously combat and movement can be most prevalent in across all of them. But I think you'll see supporting units use focus a lot more often than other units, just because they are getting 2 extra dice from that instead of the 1 because they're doing 2 separate attack rolls.
Yeah, that's fair.
But yeah, with
fair.
the melee engagement, I really, really like it because it gives you it incentivizes you to run away from force users who are going to like stab you in the face, right? And also I think it makes melee expertise charts on primarily ranged characters a lot more important than it would be otherwise, because potentially you take that melee attack just to try and get like a shove that's on your tree to get yourself out of there, just so that you can free yourself up for a further movement, as your like second action and things like that.
Yeah, I think these support units, to your point, Quinn, I can also see them using heal as well quite a bit. Like, I want to take this off my big, off Anakin or off Darth Maul or something
how
like
about
that.
you just get your attack expertise now?
Yeah. What's interesting as well with some of those actions is, and we're going slightly off topic here, but that's fine. You do it once with your support units, but to your point, Quinn, where you get 2 dice, you could remove 2 special conditions or 1 damage, 1 special condition, or heal 2. So you're actually getting a lot more value.
Look, it's why I think support units like have value, like mechanically in the game. Like,
I think it's also why they have limited actions to 1.
Yeah.
That was the thing when we first seen it. We were like, oh well, you can't double attack someone. That seems insane, you know what I mean? But we come from MCP. But when you break it down into support units sharing actions, you can walk up to Anakin and go, oh,
heal 4,
heal 2, and then heal 2 again.
Yeah,
that just seems crazy. You know what I mean? That's like
long
on a stick.
Well, yeah, exactly. But I do like that. And the fact they can be at opposite ends of the boards and things like that.
I'll heal Ahsoka one. I'll heal Anakin one, and then I'll shoot.
And I do believe, even though we've not had this confirmed, I don't believe there's any restrictions around who you can heal. Right? If I'm a 501st Trooper with Anakin, I can heal Ahsoka.
I believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like you have to heal squad members, right? It's just anyone in your strike team.
It's anyone.
I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's finish then, guys, on stance cards, because we did find out a little bit more information about this. We've touched upon it a little bit, but a couple of things is every single primary will have a double-sided stance card, as we've already seen. What typically looks like is happening is one is a little bit more defensive, one is a little bit more offensive. But that's not a rule of thumb, but every primary will have 2. In the core box, every other character only has 1. So every secondary and every support unit, it's only single-sided. However, once again, that doesn't mean that in the future that isn't something that they can implement. And you can choose whichever stance you want as you start the game. So when you start the game, you can start with whatever stance you want, and during your activation, you can change stance once, and it can be at any time other than in the middle of a dice roll. So you can't roll your dice, go, oh, actually, if I change from here to here, I'm going to get 3 more damage. I'll do that. Once you roll the dice, you're stuck to it. But to your point, Quinn, I think you asked the question earlier about Anakin makes his attack and then uses his force powers to use his power to be able to do a second attack. I think there's going to be a window of opportunity there where you can switch. So you might go all out for your first one and then go, I'm going to go my defensive one for this next follow-up.
I think that might be... I have a slightly different opinion. I think it's because of the type of ability that is. because it's a reactive ability that you trigger in response to the attack having been made.
Oh, maybe
it's going to be like a frenzy.
Then.
It's like
Yeah.
I don't think there's going to be like a window.
Yeah,
in between
it's like
the
how
attacks.
in Frenzy you don't get like an option to pick up an objective midway through. Like
No,
I
it's a good
don't
point.
know. I don't think you will.
No,
which is a little bit unfortunate, but yeah.
Now I realised it was a react. I thought it was active, so that's on me. Now it's a reactive ability. I completely agree, but it does mean that you can start out and
in attack and then
in attack form, and then switch at the end of your activation to change. When it comes to the combat trees, it is left to right, up and down, but you can only move left to right. So Maul's Dark Rage that we can see here.
Yeah, no doubling background.
No doubling background. So for this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 successes. Any more than 6 successes are wasted successes, basically. You don't get anything extra for them. So, yeah, you can't double background. One thing that we didn't mention, and I just want to mention it now because I've seen some of the symbols, special conditions. If you would be applying a special condition that a character already has. So this one here, we can see we've got strain on Maul's, for example. If they already had a strain on them, then this strain would just turn into an extra damage, basically. So it just becomes an extra damage, and that's the same for all of the special conditions that are in there. Guys, anything else on stance cards that you think we maybe missed or whatever it may be?
No, I think we've pretty much covered everything. One's for attacking, one's for defending majority of the time. If you look at Savage, for example, not Savage, Ventress, she has very much 2 different combat trees, with one being very condition heavy.
Yeah.
So it's not always going to be an attack and defense thing. One's going to be mobility, one's going to be conditions, one's going to be healing.
Yeah. It's also worth pointing out as well, guys, whilst we're at this bit around combat, go and watch the other video. I'll put a link down in the description below, and there'll be a tag here somewhere. Video I did a week or so ago runs through exactly how it'll work. The way that we did it there is exactly how it works. The only other thing to add to that video is that you resolve each of the boxes in turn. So again, we've got Maul's down the middle here. He gets to do, first one is 2 damage. He gets to put 2 damage in the pot. Then it's 2 more damage. You put it in the pot. You haven't applied them yet. So even if they've only got 1 health left, you still get to do all of these things in turn. So 2 damage in the pot, 2 damage in the pot, a damage and a shove in this one. Then 2 damage in the pot, then the shove, and then the shove at the end. And then once you've resolved everything, you then apply the damage. So it means that you're not wasting and you're not losing any of those other things that you get to do.
That's really interesting because of Ventress's Form 2 Makashi. Because obviously she has the active ability trigger at the end of her tree.
Yeah.
And in the one before that, she has a reposition. So potentially, she's hitting someone, then she does the reposition, advance, the longer move, and ends up, force pushing someone else.
Somebody else,
that was out
absolutely.
of range initially. I like that a lot.
Yeah, so I do like the fact that you get everything off. It's not like, because we have that a lot in MCP, don't you? It's like, I really want to throw you, but I did too much damage, or I wanted to push you over here, but I can't do it. So I like that it follows that left to right mechanism. But yeah, guys, we're going to leave it there because that is a long enough video as it is. I don't know about you guys, but I was already hyped and looking forward to it. It just goes up, right? One thing that we haven't spoke about are obviously all of the reveals. We'll do that in a separate video, and we'll put that out later this week, and we'll go through each of those reveals in turn, what we think it means. But overall, Ron, has your enthusiasm for the game gone up, gone down, stayed the same, or where are you at right now with Shatterpoint?
Based purely on this video or the stuff that they showed at Adepticon?
Everything Adepticon wise.
Oh mate, I am fucking pumped.
Yup.
They've shown one thing that I've been wanting for a very long time. And yeah, God help anyone who has to play against me with them. It's going to be a nightmare.
Excellent, excellent. Quinn, and obviously you were very happy about some of the reveals that will, yeah. But that aside, rules, what we've learned, because I think whilst there was a lot of, okay, just confirm what we'd already thought, there was a few things in there that they threw in that we weren't expecting.
So I mean, there was like a little bit of a dip in terms of enthusiasm when it was revealed that you could only do one of each action in a given activation. That, like, now with more context around it and sort of understanding the game and how it plays a little bit more, I'm okay with it. And also, as we all know, I'm going to be sick at Shatterpoint, so...
Sick at Shatterpoint.
Yeah, bro. Sick at Shatterpoint.
We are going to be having a bit of an Adepticon week this week, guys, because there's a whole bunch of MCP stuff to break down as well. So if you do follow MCP, make sure you check out the Weekly Bugle, 5:30 on Friday. It's going to be a bumper one because we've got a lot to go through. Some lovely new mutants. Remember, guys, we are giving away a Shatterpoint. Shatterpoint core box. All you need to do to be with a chance to win is to leave a like on this and every other video that we've got. Make sure you leave a comment, and we're going to pick one video at random. And then as long as you've left a like on that video, as long as you've left a comment on that video, and as long as you subscribe to the channel, you can be in with a chance to win yourselves a brand new Shatterpoint box. Just in time, I think, for the next big round of reveals, which looks like it's going to be the 4th, 5th, 6th of May. Which, you know, makes sense. It's a Star Wars holiday, so...
Life Day.
Life Day. Do check out as well. I know that the guy, I don't know if it's the guys from AMG or if it's going to be third party, are going to be down at the Star Wars Celebration in London over the Easter weekend. So if you didn't get a chance to go to Adepticon, that's your next chance to get some demo games. But being brutally honest, guys, go watch one of the videos. I'll put a link down in the description below. The guys from the Jodo cast, I think it is, or the Jodo podcast, did a really good video. Probably better than AMG's, actually, in terms of video quality and sound quality and things like that. So go and check that out. If you want to support us, you can do by heading over to Patreon for as little as £1 a month. Helps us continue to make these videos. And we also have a Discord. There's a dedicated Shatterpoint page on there now. Plus we talk all of the sorts of games on there as well. And as always, it leaves me with just enough time to say stay well, keep safe, and until next time, may the Force be with you.